because the Borgen Project, we through the years have always talked about the link between poverty and national security. And you read like all the 9/11 reports, you read a lot of the different national security experts stuff they put out through the years, particularly post 9/11. And they all say the same thing. When people have no hope and opportunity, that creates those conditions of instability where terrorist groups can operate freely and bad things tend to happen. So one thing that surprised me was I felt like almost everything Israel does is what you would do to create terrorism. Does that make sense? And I don't mean that as an excuse for what Hamas did, but I just mean it as, you have people who are constantly, they're not allowed to have airport, they're not allowed to have seaport, they're not allowed to travel, they're not allowed to, and you cut off food all the time, you cut off water all the time, you cut off, you harass them at checkpoints. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know how that leads to stuff. So that said, I would have thought, some countries I go to, there's a little bit of a rough element to it. And I was just surprised, and maybe surprised isn't the right word, but I was quite impressed how peaceful the Palestinians are overall. It just as a whole. I walked through some really poor areas, these dark little alleys and places where people in apartments above could have thrown rocks at me or bottles at me, or especially being American. I mean, we should be unpopular there, but people were great. They were kind, and whatever sketchy area I went to, it was felt completely safe. So that was sort of surprising. I've talked to other aid workers out there too, and that was their takeaway also, is like, it just this isn't a group prone to terrorism by any means at all. But you do see how, people at breaking points, at some point, if you've been harassed a bunch your entire life and you had family members killed or who are being held up in prisons for not getting tried, for just wasting away. And you see at some point it creates that breaking point. But and so I guess sort of along those lines too, is one of the places I visited was UNRWA had a facility where they were training kind of at-risk youth, and these are like kids guys who dropped out of high school or got into trouble, and they were like teaching them different skills, like how to solder keyboards and stuff that's like marketable and they can potentially get jobs in. So this is one of those programs, like, this is brilliant in my mind. Like, you definitely want to have teenage boys, in particular, teenage to early 20s. Yes, occupied. You want them having a path to success, and girls too, obviously. But like, if you're trying to actually counter terrorism, if you're serious about that, you definitely want to do everything you can to keep late teen to early 20 boys and young men employed, busy, and not sitting around getting harassed and trying to get to be susceptible to some of these groups like Hamas, right? So anyway, so that was kind of cool to see the program in action. But then you're also like, well, and this will potentially be gone in 2 months because Israel just banned UNRWA, and what happens to these kids? And what happens to all the kids?
You're sort of potentially got a quite stable-ish community, people learning skills, having an education, making their way sort of through life. It's all going to be taken away. What happens then? We're talking about, like you say, potential breeding ground for terrorism. I mean, if we go to a situation where people aren't getting an education, they've got no hope, things go backwards in terms of poverty levels, and someone from an organisation comes along and says, hey, here's a bunch of money if you just pop along and join us and do this. It doesn't take a lot to sort of join those dots together, unfortunately.
Especially if you've been harassed a lot. I thought about this with the checkpoints, because I'm like, me and my brother are nice guys, but I can guarantee you if I had to go through that checkpoint every day, my entire childhood, by the age of 14, I'm probably mouthing off to the police at that point, or I'm probably, I don't know, doing what. And that's when they get beat up, they get sent off and held in prison forever. And so, you just, none of this follows any logic of what you do to protect your country if you're Israel. It just follows, I don't know what this follows. It just felt like the Soviet Union in the 1970s or something, where you just kind of feel like there's a lot of surveillance going on, and you kind of feel like you're harassed a lot, and Big Brother's watching her. So it just seems so unproductive to creating actual peace there. And I don't know if that's somewhat I don't know if there's just such obsession with putting Palestinians in a place, or if there's like a weird reverse. As long as we keep different terrorist flare-ups occurring, then that gives us more power and keep getting weapons from other countries. And
is that their objective? Take away whatever they have, so that they do become sort of an angry potential hotbed of terrorists, as they like to say. Then you've got an excuse to go in there and do something about it effectively.
Exactly, and take more land and do whatever, and get have the international community support you because you got to deal with this terrorism situation. And I don't know.
You've actually created yourself because you've removed the organization. That's
So it kind of had that vibe about it. And I should point out, I can't remember if we mentioned this in past episodes, like General Petraeus, who led the U.S. operations, he had kind of key roles both in Afghanistan and Iraq. He would keep a sign above his desk that said something to the effect of, does this mission create more terrorists than it kills? And that was sort of like his guiding light when he was deciding, do we bomb this city? Do we send soldiers into houses in this area? Do we, just that idea that when you're, causing harm to civilian population, you're potentially creating more terrorists than you. That's just like a basic, particularly in Afghanistan, lesson the U.S. learned out there. And that guiding light does not exist with the way Israel interacts with Palestinians. I can definitely tell you that.